All right, I'm back. It's time to do 66 to 34. Let's get right into it. So, what I ranked as number 66 is Office Space from 1999, directed by Mike Judge. Now, Mike Judge is the guy that invented Beavis and Butthead. He's probably mostly known for Beavis and Butthead, but this Office Space film is just, it's a hilarious film because it just, if you've ever worked in an office, the humor in it will grab a hold of you, and you'll have a difficult time not laughing. So it's basically about a high tech company in Texas and the employees that work in it, and how most of them are bored with their jobs, and they have this manager that continually causes them stress for no reason, right? So if you've never worked in an office, I think you'll still find it funny. But if you've worked in an office, you'll find it even more funny. So it's one of the all-time great comedies, from the '90s. What was his name? Milton? It was Milton, right? Yeah, Milton. Milton is the character that makes it for me. He's always getting pushed around by the office manager. What his name was? Lindbergh or Lundberg? Lindbergh. He talks in that monotone. He talks in a monotone voice and goes, "Well, I think you need to do this, or I think you need to do that," and it's quite irritating to listen to him, right? But he kind of really picks on Milton and keeps pushing his desk further and further away from the actual office. And by the end of the movie, he ends up like in the basement, like near the boiler in the boiler room or something. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen the film. But then, of course, Milton gets his revenge and kind of burns down the whole building, right? So yeah, it's a pretty funny film. Now, Mike Judge has a really good sense of humor. I was never a huge fan of Beavis and Butthead, but I kind of understand the attraction of that. you know, some people will find that funny, right? So he did Beavis and Butthead Do America, but I wouldn't put that in any top 100 list. One that I would though by him is Idiocracy. If you haven't seen that film is pretty hilarious, right? So if all the stupid people take over, right? What would happen if the whole world would where stupid people would take over? So it's pretty funny. I found it quite enjoyable. I've watched it like 3 or 4 times. So now most don't think Idiocracy is a great film. In fact, most people, if I recollect, I don't know how many people actually panned this film, but I found it quite funny. So, was there anything else that he did? Beavis and Butthead Does America and Office Space, but Office Space is his best film. And but I would put Idiocracy in a if he didn't have Office Space and he had only Idiocracy, I would have put that in my top 130 because both films are really funny, right? So all right, so that's number 66, Office Space from 1999, directed by Mike Judge. All right, next up after that is Monsters Inc. from 2001, directed by Peter Docter. And this is a Pixar film. It's probably my favorite Pixar film. Most people would probably grab Toy Story, but Toy Story and Monsters Inc. both have a real clever storyline. With Toy Story, it's you use your imagination as a kid, and you wonder if when you're not around, do your toys come to life? And in this film, they actually do. So that's a clever thing. And all the toys, their main purpose is to make the kid who owns them happy, right? That's their whole job in life, right? So it's a quite good film. But I liked Monsters Inc. just a little bit more because that story is even just a little bit more clever. And the story behind that one is basically every kid always thinks that there's like monsters under his bed or in his closet or whatever, right? And so Pixar takes that idea and says, okay, the reason why these monsters are there is not because they're bad guys or anything. They're good guys, but it's their job to go scare kids because when kids scream, it creates this energy in the monster world, and it gives the city that these monsters live in electricity, runs the electricity, right? And it's all done through a corporation called Monsters Inc., right? So, but the twist in it, that's funny enough as it is, but what's even funnier is the monsters are actually afraid of the kids because if the kids or anything in that world that they go into, when they come from their world into the kids' world, into their bedroom or wherever, if they get touched by the kid, it could kill them. At least that's what the myth is or whatever in the film, right? So they're actually more afraid of the kids than the kids are afraid of them, right? So and it turns out though that one of the kids that one of the monsters is supposed to scare actually goes through the portal door, right, into the world of monsters, and that just scares every monster in the in 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 the monster world. And then they find out from it that when kids laugh, it's actually like 10 or however many times more powerful, more energetic than when they scream. So what ends up happening by the end of the film is I'm kind of ruining the film for you, but what ends up at the end of the film is that now the monsters are going into the kids' worlds not to scare them, but to make them laugh, so they become more comic, right? So now nobody's afraid of anybody anymore, right? So the monsters realize that the kids can't hurt them, and the kids realize that the monsters can't hurt them, and now the monsters become more of like jokers or jesters or all that to make the kids laugh. And when the kids laugh, it makes power for the monster world, right? It's a really cool twist and everything, like where kids are afraid of monsters, but in this, you should watch a kid, and then you can tell your kids that the monsters are even more scared of you than you are of the monsters, and the monsters aren't actually real and all. Anyway, so it's quite a charming story, and it's my favorite Pixar film. Now there are other Pixar films directed by Peter Docker, if I remember correctly, and that's Up from 2009, Inside Out from 2015, and Soul from 2020. Any of those could have made it as well. But the early Pixar is the best Pixar. The ones Up is really good. Monsters Inc. and Toy Story and Wall-E is really good as well. So if I was to pick the four best, that would be it. Toy Story, Monsters Inc., Wall-E, and Up would probably be my four best Pixar films, right? All right. So that's the Pixar film on the list, and it's numbered at 65. All right. So now number 64 is a Sam Peckinpah film from 1971, and it's called Straw Dogs. Now, Peckinpah's had a lot of. Peckinpah is a very visceral type of director. Like, he'll add violence into his films just to make them more, well, visceral, right? Make them more, you know what I mean? And he's directed a lot of great films, but his greatest film, at least in my opinion, is Straw Dogs, the one that stars Dustin Hoffman. He's married to a girl, a British girl, and he's an American, and they go back to her hometown so that he can do some writing. I think he's a writer or whatever, right? She hasn't been in her hometown, which is like out in the middle of nowhere almost. It's small since she moved to the States or whatever, and then the locals look at Dustin Hoffman as a weakling, and because of it, they take advantage of his wife, and one of them actually sexually assaults her, and then it gets real. And by the end of this film, it's one of the most powerful endings of a film that I've ever seen. That visceralness, that animal instinct, that animal type of instinct, you see it. Dustin Hoffman does an amazing job in this film. At the end of this film, he seems to be coming off as an intellectual, a weakling, not a physical type of man. And by the end of this film, it's like you can see how certain situations can bring out, that that instinctual animal type of in a man, right? So I mean, Dustin Hoffman's just such a great actor in general. The Graduate, Marathon Man is probably my favorite by him. Rain Man. This film, Straw Dogs. But I think Straw Dogs is uh, Marathon Man is probably his best, at least in my opinion, his best acting. But no, maybe Straw Dogs. Maybe Straw Dogs is better. But the actual film itself, anyways, whatever. They're both great films. Okay, so I don't have to get particular on either one of them. But Straw Dogs is basically a Peckinpah film that is visceral as Peckinpah is. Right. So if you have not seen this film, it's actually part of the Criterion Collection. You can get it in the Criterion Collection and watch it. It'll change the way you think sometimes. And the actual sexual assault, Peckinpah made it look like almost like it was consensual, even though it wasn't consensual. So there's kind of a blurring of that. Was that actually a sexual assault, or was she willing and not willing, but willing and not willing? There's that. Anyways, he has that. There is. I think back in the '70s that there was like a gray area of sexual assault, right? Now there isn't. No means no. It's basically taught since you're, like everybody's taught no means no, right? So, but Peckinpah, when you look at that rape, it isn't him punching the girl in the face, throwing her down on the ground, and just assaulting her, right? No, this is like him. He's got like an animal magnetism to him, and she is like weak around him, right? And there's an attraction there, but she's married and she doesn't want. Anyways, it's a bit of a confusing. It's an assault. It's a sexual assault, but you can see this. The anyways, I don't know how to describe it. But anyways, it's an extremely good film. But the best part about this whole film is the ending and Dustin Hoffman, the character of Dustin Hoffman at the end of this film. It's extremely powerful. All right, so now, like I said, Peckinpah had a bunch of other films that are very good that could make the list. The Wild Bunch would be probably the first one from 1969. All right, from 1972, you had The Getaway. All right, then 1973, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid is another great film by him. 1974 is Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, and then Cross of Iron from 1977. Any of those films could make a top 130 list pretty easily, right? So, all right. So next up after that, so that was number 64, Straw Dogs from 1971, directed by Sam Peckinpah. Number 63 is a Lars von Trier film called Dancer in the Dark from 2000. Now he has a few really good films, and probably if you were to pick his best film, most people would not pick Dancer in the Dark. All right, unless they were like a super fan of Bjork. But I'm not a super fan of Bjork. Bjork is one of the greatest singers of all time ever. All right, now it makes me look like a super fan, but no, I really enjoy her music. But the reason why I put this film over some of his other films, Trier's other films, is because it's a very powerful story. It's basically Bjork plays an immigrant uh, girl who's slowly going blind, and she has a son who she's worried about after she goes blind. She works in a factory. She's saving up all her money to get an operation because he has the same condition as her, and she's going to sacrifice herself for her son to correct his vision before he goes blind, but she can't afford both. And she's going blind through the film already, but she's saving up money to have an operation to fix her son's eyes. And what happens is somebody close to her finds out about that money and steals it from her, right, and takes her dream away. And she ends up. Anyways, I don't want to ruin the ending of this. And Von Trier, the ending of this film is really powerful and really depressing and really sad. So if you like really sad, depressing films, you're going to really enjoy this film. Okay, and it's also like a pseudo musical because Bjork does sing in this film, and other characters do as well. In it's almost like a musical, but it's not a staged musical where you have stages and people dancing and everything else. No, they're in the house or they're in this or whatever, and then they start. She starts singing. Usually, it's when she goes off because her life is not all that happy. She kind of daydreams and goes off into her own world, and that's where she's uh, like happy and she's singing in that. So, and Von Trier ended up filming this with like a handheld camera rather than a stationary camera or a movable camera. It was like on the shoulder type of camera. So you get this. So it feels like it more of a documentary. I don't know if there's I don't recall music except for when they're singing. No background music through the film to set moods or anything. So it's kind of stark and it's kind of almost amateuristic. Amateurish is that a word? Amateur, like done by an amateur because of the handheld camera, but he did that on purpose. He wanted to make it seem more real, the film to seem more like a documentary, and the ending is just extremely depressing. So get prepared for it if you decide to watch this. But you get to hear Bjork sing in this, and uh, out of all, I've listened to thousands of albums, thousands of CDs, and out of all the CDs and albums that I've heard, there's maybe four women that have like just stunningly stellar voices. There are others, obviously, you know what I mean, but there's the four main ones. Bjork is one of them. Whitney Houston is another. All right, Celine Dion is another, even though I'm not a big fan of Celine Dion's music. And my all-time favorite female voice, who I think has an extremely good voice, is Sinead O'Connor. All right, so those four, if you haven't really listened to any of their music, pick it up, see what you think. They have amazing voices. If you like female voices that go from high, like hit those high notes really, really crisply and really clearly, and have a falsetto to them as well, that kind of thing. I find Sinead O'Connor to be my favorite, but Whitney Houston, everybody knows Whitney Houston, right? She has an amazing voice. Bjork as well, and like I said, Celine Dion, the Canadian. All right, so but that's Dancer in the Dark, starring Bjork, and it came out in 2000, directed by Lars von Trier. Now, Lars von Trier has a few other films that would easily make a top 130 list and not look stupid, let's say. Breaking the Waves from 1995 or 96 would be one. Dogville, which is an extremely, extremely good film. Uh, Investigate that film if you haven't seen that film. That is a really good film as well. Like if I wasn't going to put Dancer in the Dark, I'd probably put Dogville in there instead, and then Manderley from 2005 would be the next one. But probably his, you know, consensus wise, probably Dogville is his greatest film, and some people will say Breaking the Waves, but I think Dogville, more people thought Dogville was a better film than Dancer in the Dark, but I still think Dancer in the Dark is his best film. All right, and it's number 63 on the list, directed by Lars von Trier, and it came out in 2000. All right, so next up is number 62. Is a French film. All right, directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and this this film is one of the most charming films you'll ever watch in your life. It's got that sweetness, that joy, I guess you could call it. Some films are meant to depress you, some films are meant to scare you, some films are meant to put you in a romantic mood, but there's just some films that create joy, and those are few and far between. But when you come across one that does create joy in you, I cherish them. And that film is Amelie. All right, so Amelie from 2001, directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and this has like a childlike wonder and joy to it. It's basically about a girl, a young woman who clandestinely, like she's some kind of spy or whatever, goes about bringing people together and falling in love, right? Meanwhile, her personal life is kind of she's wanting to have the same, but she can't have it, right? But there's this mystery character that that's in it as well. But I don't want to ruin the film. The magic of the film is you need to watch it from beginning to end, and when you do, it's like, wow, this is such a good film. It's like, it puts a smile on your face. It just makes you feel good. You know what I mean? So, and the way that she, you know, I guess you'd call it manipulation. The way that she manipulates everything in order to get people that maybe are too shy to get together, and how. Anyway, so it's extremely good. It's basically about love and joy. And if maybe maybe after watching Dancer in the Dark being super depressed, maybe you should pick up Amelie. He'll put you in a better mood afterwards. Make you feel good, right? Because Dancer in the Dark is not going to make you feel good, right? So, all right. So anyway, so that's Amelie, one of the most joyous films I've ever seen, directed by Jean Pierre Jeunet, and it's number 62 on the list. Now, he did have one other film that could make a top 130 list, I think, as well, and that's The City of Lost Children from 1995. That one was a really good film as well. If you haven't seen that film, check that one out as well. All right, so that's 62. Let's go to 61, and this is one of my all-time favorite horror films, and it's my all-time favorite werewolf film. All right, and this is directed by John Landis. All right, and it came out in 1981. It's called An American Werewolf in London, and this film is such a great film. It again is a horror film, but has comedy in it, right? It's kind of comedic, like Evil Dead, that kind of where it's a horror, but it's also funny, right? So it's basically about two Americans. They visit England, and they're out on the moors, and they end up getting attacked by a werewolf. One ends up dying, and the other one ends up living, but he ends up turning into a werewolf, right? So, and then he, terrorized the suburbs of London, right? So, and yeah, it's quite funny. The funny part is because the friend that died keeps coming back to the friend that lived and telling him to kill himself because he's a werewolf, and he's going to forget what he's doing, and the moon's going to come out, and he's going to go out and kill people, and he needs to kill himself before he starts killing other innocent people, right? All through the film, right? So it's some of it, and the makeup effects. I mean, this is what, 1981. Is that what I said? Yeah, I think it was 1981, right? Yeah, 1981. The makeup effects in this are really, really good. Like, you know, um, his friend that died, you know, half of his face is ripped off and it's kind of hanging. And what happens is it doesn't stay that way through the whole film. Time goes through the whole film, and his friend is kind of rotting over the time period of the film, right? So he's freshly killed at the beginning when he first talks to his friend who survived, and then by the end of the film, he's like, his skin is all black and dark, and the blood is all black on him and everything, right? And he's kind of rotting and decaying, right? So whoever did the makeup effects, the special effects makeup stuff in this film, um, I'll put his name down here. Um, Extremely good job. He did an extremely good job in this film, and this film is scary in some points and laugh out loud in other points, and it's a quite enjoyable film, and I think you'll enjoy it if you haven't seen it. All right, so that's John Landis's American Werewolf in London. Now, John Landis had three other films that I would put in a top 130 list. Some others might not, but if I didn't put American Werewolf in London in this one, I would have put Innocent Blood, and a lot of people don't never even heard of Innocent Blood, or if they have, they don't think it's a great film, but I do. I think it's an amazing film, and it's basically about a French a French woman, and she's the one that starred in Luc Besson's Nikita, La Femme Nikita, right? She played La Femme Nikita, and she's in this film as well. In this film, she plays a vampire who enjoys her life as a vampire, and she goes out every night, and she's a sexy woman, and she attracts men or whatever, and it's very easy for her to stay alive. And anyways, but she ends up she decides that she's going to go after the Italian mob, and it's quite funny and it's quite entertaining. It's a very entertaining film, right? And she goes after the Italian mob. Anyways, it's a it's a quite a fun film, right? And it's one of my all-time favorite vampire films. Innocent Blood is, but anyway, so Trading Places is another one. So Innocent Blood from 1992 would be one. Trading Places, the Eddie Murphy film with Dan Aykroyd. The two rich guys decide to switch them to see. It's like a social experiment. Anyways, I don't want to. If you haven't seen that film, it's quite funny. And the Blues Brothers with Dan Aykroyd and Jim Belushi, John Belushi, John Belushi, and John Belushi. Anyway, so those would be the three other films that could make this list. But I chose American Werewolf in London from 1981, directed by John Landis, and it's number 61 on the list. Right. Next up is number 60, and this is a Paul Verhoeven film. How you speak about Paul Verhoeven might be similar to how you speak about Sam Peckinpah in the way that Peckinpah's films are very visceral and ultra violent, I guess you could say. There's just that little bit extra of violence in Peckinpah's films. Well, that's the way that Verhoeven directed his films, especially those films, that group of films he did in the 80s and 90s, RoboCop, Starship Troopers. What was the Schwarzenegger film? Yeah, Total Recall. Those films, where there's just overkill on the violence in it, especially RoboCop and Starship Troopers. But RoboCop is probably Verhoeven's best film, and it's basically about a guy who was a cop and ends up being fatally wounded by drug dealers or whatever, and so then they end up making him into a super cop where he's mostly a robot, right? So, and then he goes out and kicks ass, right? So it's quite fun. The scenes, they actually have some commercial scenes in it. Like there's one with this anti-theft device for your car, where the person goes in to steal your car, and then they end up getting killed and dumped on the side of the road, right? Um, just ultra violent. You know what I mean? This film is over the top violence, right? But that's what Verhoeven was known for in the 80s and early 90s, right? And RoboCop is his best film. It's from 1987. Now, I did mention two other films by him. That is Total Recall, the Schwarzenegger film, where um, he's brainwashed or whatever, right? And Starship Troopers, which is another favorite film of mine about you know humans fighting bugs, right? So, all right, so those are two other films that I wouldn't have any problem being put in the top 130 list. All right, so that's number RoboCop from 1987, directed by Paul Verhoeven, number 60 on the list. So number 59 is a Clint Eastwood film. All right, and it's one of his early uh, westerns he did. All right, so you know, he made his name with being an actor in those Sergio Leone spaghetti western films, and he also Don Siegel would direct him in other westerns, and then Don Siegel moved over to Cops, and he followed him, did the Dirty Harry series and that kind of thing. Those two directors taught Clint Eastwood how to direct, and when he directed The Outlaw Josie Wales in 1976, he did a very good uh, job of it, and it's one of my favorite Clint Eastwood films directed by Clint Eastwood, right? So now Clint Eastwood, as you know, has directed a lot of films, and he's acted in a lot of films as well. But his best films that he's directed that wouldn't look out of place in a top 130 list would be High Plains Drifter, all right, which is the one that he directed before he did The Outlaw Josie Wales, all right, and then Pale Rider, another western that he did in 1985. That one was really good as well because uh, he hadn't directed a western or started a western, if I remember correctly. He did the Dirty Harry films. He was more of a cop uh, and did other things, right? He did what the Which Way But Loose and Any Which Way You Can films. And that he kind of was dating Sandra Locke at the time. And he did films with her in the films, right? And anyway, so then in 1992, he directed another Western, Unforgiven. And a lot of people think that Unforgiven is probably his greatest Western film. And it was really good. And Gene Hackman does an extremely good job in that film. Gene Hackman is an amazing actor. Then in 2003, he did Mystic River. Um, and in 2004, he did Million Dollar Baby. So those five films, along with Outlaw Josie Wales, a sixth film, any of those six films could make a top 100 list, right? So, all right, so those are all of his films, but I chose The Outlaw Josie Wales from 1976, and it's number 59 on the list. Number 58 is a Jackie Chan film, and it's probably Jackie Chan's best film, and it's called Police Story, and it's from 1985. And yeah, if you haven't watched any Jackie Chan films, watch his films from Hong Kong, his Chinese films, his Hong Kong films. He brought that whole style over to the United States. When he started doing Rush Hour and those type of films. Well, he originally, you know, munched his teeth on that kind of film back in Hong Kong. And the opening sequences of Police Story will just blow you away. It's like they're in Hong Kong, but it kind of looks like a miniature. When you see see the hills in Rio de Janeiro with all the shanty shacks and everything along the hills, the mountains in Rio de Janeiro. Well, they kind of made a miniature type of thing like that in Hong Kong, and then what they did was they took two cars and drove through it, smashing through every building, going down this hill, right? And it's like, whoa, wow, that was awesome. That those opening action scenes were extremely well. The whole film is really, if you watch any American films by Jackie Chan, he does almost, does all of his own stunts, and those stunts are kind of funny, but also like, whoa, that wow factor to a lot of his stunts, right? Well, they're all over the place in Police Story. It's such an amazing action film if you haven't seen it, and I don't want to wreck the whole film, but basically it's Jackie Chan and going up against bad guys like he always does, drug guys in Hong Kong, right? So, all right, so that's Police Story from 1985. It's number 82. Now, Jackie Chan directed two other films that would also probably wouldn't look out of place if you liked, action and martial arts cinema, and that would be The Young Master from 1980 and The Drunken Master 2 from 1994. All right, so that's Jackie Chan, number 58, Police Story from 1985. Let's go to 57, and this is an Irving Lerner film noir. It's one of my all-time favorite film noirs, and it came out in 1958, and it's called Murder by Contract. All right, so this one basically is a hitman in the film, and he goes about killing people in it, and he kind of shows you how he does it. All these interesting ways of killing people without, so that he doesn't get caught, doesn't get seen, doesn't get. So it's almost like the interest of me was like, oh, okay, it kind of is like a primer of how to be a hitman, right? Way back before, like, Leon the Professional or whatever, right? So yeah, he goes about killing people in all these different ways, right? So it's quite an enjoyable film. It's in black and white, but it's basically a film noir. Nobody's good in this film. The people that are killing aren't nice people and everything else, right? So I just found it quite enjoyable. And actually, he's hired to kill somebody, and then he doesn't do it because she's a woman. And not that he has any qualms with killing women. It's just that women cost more, and they didn't tell him he was a woman, so he didn't do it. And so then they send two hitmen after him to kill him or whatever. Anyways, it gets quite intriguing. I haven't seen it in a while, but it's probably, I don't know if it's my all time favorite film noir, but I would have to. There's so many great film noirs, right? And I went on a binge and I watched a whole bunch of them, and sometimes they blur into other ones, but I think this one might be my all-time favorite one. So it's called Murder by Contract, directed by Irving Lerner, and Irving Lerner also did another great film noir, and that's City of Fear. But I like Murder by Contract more than City of Fear. Some people might be reversed on that. So, but either one of those films, pick them up, take a look at them. You won't be disappointed. All right. So, Murder by Contract, 1958, directed by Irving Lerner, and that's number 57. So now number 56 is my all-time favorite Edgar Wright film, and Edgar Wright is like the Mel Brooks, the British Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks did a whole bunch of films in the 70s and 80s, spoofing different genres of films, like Spaceballs. He spoofed the science fiction film, a Star Wars film, Blazing Saddles. He did, spoofed the Western, that kind of thing. Young Frankenstein. He spoofed the horror film. Well, Edgar Wright did the same thing in the 2000s. All right, and but what he spoofed was the zombie film genre, the buddy cop film genre, and like the apocalypse type of genre, right? And those three films are his best films, but the best out of all of them was the first one, Shaun of the Dead. And I didn't write down when it came out. When did Shaun of the Dead come out? 2004. All right. So in 2004, he directed Shaun of the Dead, and it stars most of his films starred Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Sorry. All right. So the trilogy of films that parodied different genres of films, Shaun of the Dead did that with the zombie film, and it's another horror, but it's more of a comedy than a horror. But it mixes the two elements together, right? And Edgar Wright did a really good job with this. Like you'll laugh throughout the whole film, right? He's such an Simon Pegg is such an underachiever in this film, and then he goes about saving people and becoming a hero, right? So, anyways, it's quite fun, and so is Hot Fuzz from 2007. That's the buddy film, uh, the buddy cop film that he spoofs, right? From 2007. Then he did Pilgrim versus the World, which is another really good film, and then The World's End. So Pilgrim versus the World is from 2010. The World's End from 2013. That's the apocalypse one, the end of the world one. And he also did one right recently that was really good, and that's the Sparks Brothers. So any of those films in the top 130, I wouldn't have an issue with. All right. So next up after that, so that was Shaun of the Dead from 2004, directed by Edgar Wright, number 56. Okay, so next up is number 55, which is a Norman Jewison film from 1967, and it's called In the Heat of the Night. And this is a really tense type of police investigation, right? Where Sidney Poitier plays Virgil Tibbs. He's a police officer from up north in Philadelphia, and he's down south visiting family. Or he was on a train going somewhere. I can't remember exactly why he was down south, but he's down south, and Rod Steiger plays the sheriff or the chief of police in the town that he's in, and they bring Virgil Tibbs into a murder investigation but it's in the South and it's in the '60s, and nobody respects him as a police officer. So he goes about, like pushing everybody's buttons and being an ass, and you know, on purpose because he hates white people because white people hate black people or hate him, right? So, anyways, it's basically it's a white versus black conflict kind of thing, and it brings all that racism all to a head where even the chief of police is a racist, but he he respects the badge, right? And Virgil Tibbs is a fellow police officer, right? But they bump heads throughout the whole film, and there's racism, not overt racism. I mean, like in your face racism throughout this film, and you get an idea of what the American South was like back at in this period of time from this film, right? And it's an extremely good film if you haven't seen it. So Norman Jewison is one of Canada's greatest directors, and there's other films on that he's directed that could make this list. The Cincinnati Kid from 1965, uh, Fiddler on the Roof from 1971, um, and Justice for All from 1979, and the Cher film Moonstruck from 1987. That's a really good romantic comedy if you haven't seen that film. It keeps going under my radar when I think of all my favorite romantic comedies. I think of like my all-time favorite one, as I mentioned already, is When Harry Met Sally. I really liked Love Actually. I liked Some Kind of Wonderful, but there's always those ones that I really enjoy, but then I forget. Moonstruck is one of them. That was a really good romantic comedy. If you haven't seen that one, pick that one up and watch it. Okay, so that's Norman Jewison in the Heat of the Night, number 55 on the list from 1967. All right, so now number 54 is a Guy Ritchie film, and Guy Ritchie reinvigorated, the crime film, right, where you get to go take a look at crime, right? Except he did it in a way that it's crime, but a lot of the criminals are just bumbling idiots, right? He did two films like that: Snatch from 2000 and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels from 1998, if I remember correctly. Let me do this again here. Yeah, from 1998. All right, so this is the film that put Guy Ritchie on on the map, and he followed it with Snatch afterwards. But Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels is just a bit better than Snatch. The reason why is the story, which is basically about these antique guns, right? And these bumbling idiot criminals who steal them, right? And then they're going to use them in a robbery. But then this happens and that happens, that happens. Anyways, these guns. I don't. The story is 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 what really makes this film. Now the characters in it are very memorable, right? But the story of these guns and where they go and how they travel is quite interesting. All right, so I don't want to wreck the story for you if you haven't seen it, but yeah, it's quite funny. It's a quite funny film, and then Guy Ritchie follows it up with Snatch, and in Snatch, Brad Pitt plays a gypsy, and that was an amazing. That's probably his best performance of any performance that he's done in his whole career. It's just that small role that he had in Snatch where he plays a gypsy, right? So it's worth watching just for Brad Pitt playing a gypsy in Snatch. It's about a diamond. Uh, but Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels is Ritchie's best film. But like I said, if you reverse it and put Snatch in instead, no issue with that, right? So Guy Ritchie's 1998 film Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels is number 54 on the list. So next up at 53 is Jaws from Steven Spielberg from 1975. Um, Spielberg has just so many films that you could choose from, but I decided to do Jaws because Jaws was such a revolutionary film back in 1975. Everybody went and saw that film. It was just so amazing, and the animatron or whatever you want to call it, the shark, the shark machine, you know, the machine that they made with a shark looked so real at the time, right? And it's funny because you don't even see that shark until what, like halfway through the film or even more. You just hear that music, dun 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 dun, right? But yeah, it's just it's a scary film, right? When it goes up on the boat, uh, yeah, it's just an amazing film. It's probably Spielberg's best. Yeah, I would say it's Spielberg's best, but there's so many great Spielberg films. He's probably the greatest American popular director of all time. He just had a string of movies that once you knew it was a Spielberg film, you just go see it because you knew it was automatically a good film, right? So, and but I think Jaws is probably his best film. Now, there's other films that could have made this list, and there's a lot of them. So let's go through them. Duel from 1971, Close Encounters of the Third Kind from 1977, very good film. Raiders of the Lost Ark, obviously, from 1981. Any of the Indiana Jones films, but Raiders of the Lost Ark is the best one. Although, although you know the guys on what's her name, Sheldon's girlfriend on The Big Bang Theory, kind of kind of wrecked that film a little bit. If you've ever watched that episode where he says that, you know, like the Harrison Ford character, you know, Indiana Jones, whether he was in the film or not, didn't change its outcome, right? So him being in the film was kind of pointless. But anyway, so I thought that was quite funny when they were discussing that on on Big Bang Theory. Anyway, so E.T. from 1982 uh, is another one. Jurassic Park from 1993, obviously. Schindler's List from 1993. Saving Private Ryan from 1998. Probably I would pick that one. If I didn't pick Jaws, I'd probably have picked Saving Private Ryan and put it on the list instead. And The Fablemans from 2022, just recently, right? So, all right, so that's Steven Spielberg's Jaws from 1975, number 53 on the list. Number 52 is a John Boorman film, all right, and that is Deliverance um, from 1972. And this film has Burt Reynolds in an actual serious role rather than, you know, that charming comedy guy, right, from, you know, Smokey and the Bandit or Cannonball Run, that kind of thing. In this film, it's one of his earlier films. He plays a serious guy, and he's kind of like a, you know, a tough guy. He's with Ned Beatty and John Voight. Was it John Voight, if I remember correctly? They all decide to go out on a trip fishing, and they end up coming into contact with some backwater hillbilly redneck guys, and some bad shits happen. And do they get off the mountain with their lives? I'll leave it up to you. But there's two. I'm not going to tell you, but there's two scenes in this film that, you know, just like the Russian roulette scene from you know, from Deer Hunter, or the you know, the Shining scene where with the axe through the door, here's Johnny. You know, there's certain scenes that just, you know, will be remembered for all time from some films, and Deliverance is one of them, and that's the Ned Beatty, you know, bark like a pig or whatever, or oink like a pig scene, and then you have the dueling banjo scene in it, but that oink like a pig scene, yeah, you'll never forget that scene if you watch this film, right? So, but yeah, it's a pretty visceral film actually. You know, like in the style of Peckinpah, but it was John Borman who directed it. Now, John Borman had a bunch of films, but the only one probably that I would put in a top 130 list if it wasn't for Deliverance would be Point Blank from 1967. All right, so that's number 52 on the list. Deliverance from 1972, directed by John Borman. Number 51 is The Wizard of Oz from 1939, a Victor Fleming film. All right, and this one, it's one of the all-time great films. I mean, it starts off in black and white and then just full-blown color. And because it starts in black and white and goes full-blown color when she lands in Oz or whatever, with the Munchkins in the Munchkin Village, and the yellow brick road kind of lights up gold, right? So yeah, and all the songs are, everybody knows all the songs, right? And the characters. Uh, Great book and an amazing film. All right, so I don't really need to talk about it much. Everybody knows it, right? So that's number 51 on the list, The Wizard of Oz from 1939. Victor Fleming had one other film that could make this list as well, and that would be Gone with the Wind, also from 1939. So he made two great films that could make a top 100 list, both in the same year. And Gone with the Wind is a really good film as well. It's a bit long, but it has that old style Southern romance, right? Which is attractive once you start watching it. The film does pull you in, even though it seems like it'd be more like a, a female film rather than a male film. But once you sit down and watch it, you will get pulled in by it. All right, next up it is number 50, and this is a James Cameron film. And out of all the James Cameron films, the one that I picked as his best was The Terminator from 1984. All right, and this film is basically a stalker film set in the future. Well, with futuristic tendencies, right? Basically, Arnold Schwarzenegger in this film is the ultimate stalker, right? It's basically Cameron sat down and said, let's make a film about a stalker, but let's add some science fiction elements to it. And this is the Terminator, right? So the Terminator is the all-time ultimate scariest stalker of a woman ever created, right? And with the budget he had and everything and the action scenes in this, it's an extremely good film. And the second one that he did as well, Terminator 2, is just, then he had a budget and look what he did with Terminator 2. But I still, that more indie cult looking type of film that the Terminator was just appeals to me more than the more slicked up, more version that Terminator 2 was, right? Although the scene in Terminator 2 when the nuclear bomb falls and she's grabbing hold of the fence uh, in the play yard, that thing, and then her skin and everything else comes right off her body. Even now, I mean, it looks a bit fake now that if you watch it now compared to what special effects are now, but at that time, that scene when I watched it in the theater just blew me away. And, ooh, yeah, you really really get an idea of what a nuclear bomb could actually do, right? But like I said, the Terminator is a better film, I think, than Terminator 2, although some others may argue. All right, so that uh, is number 50, and Cameron had three other films that I would have no issue being put on the top 100 list, and Aliens would be the first one from 1986, Terminator 2, which we just spoke about from 1991, and Avatar from 2009. A lot of people, I don't know, they're kind of like on the fence with Avatar even now, right? But I found that when I saw it in the theater, it was a bit slow at the beginning, but where it was slow, it was cool that where they're floating around and everything when they're going into the different, they're not pods, but cubicles or whatever. It's a bit slow going at the beginning, but then it kind of picks up, and then the CGI in that film is second to none. I mean, it's gorgeous, that CGI in that film, right? So it's a great film as well. All right, so that's the Terminator, number 50 on the list, from 1984, directed by James Cameron. So number 49 is a film by Robert Mulligan from 1962, and it's To Kill a Mockingbird. And basically, this is another race kind of film where Gregory Peck stars as a lawyer defending a black man in a rape case, where it's actually not rape, and that, anyways, it goes about that whole thing as well, except instead of, let's say, a black man as a police officer in the South, this time they're in the South and a black man's on trial for raping a white woman because the white woman accused him of rape when he actually didn't do it. All right, and it goes in it from there. and how you get the lowest of low, the slime balls of white people in the South are still higher than a self-respecting black man, right? So it uses that kind of, and it's based on the Harper Lee book, right? So if you haven't seen To Kill a Mockingbird, great, great, great film. Now Mulligan, I don't think had any other film that I would raise to the level of To Kill a Mockingbird or make the 100 list. So we'll leave him with just that one film. All right, so that's number 49 from 1962, To Kill a Mockingbird from Robert Mulligan. All right, next up is a Jim Jarmusch film, number 48 on the list, and this is from 1999, and it's Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, starring Forrest Whitaker. Now, this film I was blown away by, and it took me. I just found this film on DVD a few days ago, and I've been looking for it for years. Now, it's part of the Criterion collection, but I just have difficulty buying films from Criterion new. They're like $50 or $60 by the time they get to my doorstep. That's just way too much to pay for one film, right? So, but I did see this on. I think I rented it from the rented. I think I borrowed it from the library, and I watched it back in the day, and it blew me away. But I haven't seen it since. I just got the film again, and I want to watch it again. I'm excited to watch it again, but I just haven't watched it yet. But it's Jarmusch's best film, in my opinion. All right, but he did have a large number of films that could make a top 100 list. Those would be Stranger Than Paradise from 1984, Down by Law from 1986, Mystery Train from 1989, Night on Earth from 1991, Dead Man from 1995, and Patterson from 2016. So there's that big space between 1995 and 2016 where he finally made another really good film, right? So, but it's Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai is probably his best film. Um, it's Forrest Whitaker. Forrest Whitaker, you've seen him in a bunch of films, and you knew he was a good actor, like he was in so many. But it's in this film and The Last King of Scotland where you see him shine. All right, and he was in played a cop in what in just give me a second, the Jean Claude Van Damme film Bloodsport. He was a cop in that film. He did a good job. He was kind of like a anyways. But then you see him in like a Panic Room with Jodie Foster. He plays a criminal breaking into a person's house. That he did a really good job in, and he was in the Crying Game, right? He played the British soldier at the beginning of that film, right? Uh, did a good job in that. But like I said, it took him a while to shine, but he finally got into some films. This is one of them. And like I said, The Last King of Scotland, where he plays Idi Amin, is another one, and you see how he shines, right? So that's Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, number 48 on the list, directed by Jim Jarmusch from 1999. Now we go up to 47, and that is a Franklin J. Schaffner film, and it is Planet of the Apes from 1968, Charlton Heston film where the three astronauts, three uh, go out and then they end up coming back to Earth, and it's run by apes, and humans are like idiots or whatever, right? So yeah, it's quite a good film, and I remember watching it numerous times when I was a little boy, and all through my life, it was that film and Logan's Run. So that I would watch over and over again a lot of the time, right? So if you haven't seen it, you got to watch the original before you watch all the remakes. See, I enjoyed the Tim Burton film as well, Planet of the Apes, but everybody bombed that film, said it was a piece of crap, but I really enjoyed it. And I'm not a huge fan of Mark Wahlberg, but I really enjoyed that film. as well. And then I enjoyed, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, that trilogy that came afterwards, right? So the films, all the films are really good in my opinion. But it all started with the 1968 film Planet of the Apes, and that's this film. So now Schaffner did have two other films that could have made this list, and that is Patton from 1970 and Papillon from 1973. All right, so this is number 47, Planet of the Apes from 1968, directed by Franklin J. Schaffner. All right, so number 46 on the list is a Hal Ashby film, and this one is, it's sweet and funny and a little bit taboo-ish, right? So it has kind of like the taboo there, but you kind of get won over because of the quirkiness of the characters and how lovable they are and everything. So this film is called Harold and Maude, and it's from 1971, and it's basically about an older woman and a very young man. All right, and he has a fascination with death. Right, and the scenes where he plays dead are some of the funniest scenes in the film. But basically, it's a love story. It's a charming story on a taboo subject. If you look at an old man dating a 19 or 20-year-old girl, you know that he's only there because she's like eye candy or whatever, and she's only with him because he's rich or whatever. But how about if you reverse it, right? Where you have a young man being involved in a much older woman, right? You know, it's not usually seen, right? So that's the charm of this film is to see that interaction and and the Harold character, is a very quirky character, and you'll fall in love with the guy, right? So that's Harold and Maude, directed by Hal Ashby. Now, Hal Ashby had two other films that could make this list: The Last Detail from 1973 and Being There from 1979. All right, but Harold and Maude is his best film, right? So that's number 46, Harold and Maude from 1971, directed by Hal Ashby. All right, so next up is number 45, Children of Men from 2006, directed by Alfonso Cuarón. Cuarón, am I saying that properly? And this is a really good film. I like dystopian novels. They're my favorite type of novels to read. And I also like dystopian films, all right? But the dystopian films are a little bit more difficult to make well, unlike the novels. Like a lot of the transition of dystopian books into film don't work very well. Like most of them don't. Like 1984 was an okay film, but it was a great book. Fahrenheit 451 was an okay movie, but it was a great book. One that did do well, obviously, is Blade Runner, which is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? The book is, and that actually outshines the book. So, but most of the time, like I said, the book outshines the movie when it comes to dystopian novels. And you had The Handmaid's Tale, which was that Robert Duvall film. It was okay, but the the book was much better. And then they turned it into a TV series, but I hadn't seen the TV series, so I'm not sure. Okay, so this one is Children of Men. Now I don't know if this came from a book or not. I don't think so. I think this was actually written as a movie, right? So it stars Clive Owen, and basically it's in the future, like, and basically the world uh, has become infertile, and the world is, slowly falling into chaos as human beings go into, extinction, right? But then what happens is there's one girl in London or somewhere in England. She ends up actually giving birth to the first baby in like 20 years or whatever, right? 17 years, 18 years, something like that. And then Clive Owen ends up knowing that if this baby exists, uh, the mother and the newborn are in like serious danger, and he is basically takes on the role of protecting, and then you see what happens after that, right? So it's an extremely powerful film, and I watched it I watched it and I was blown away by it, and then I watched it right after. Right, I watched it again afterwards, and then I haven't seen it since then. But I watched it two times right in a row. I spent 4 hours watching this film. It was uh, quite interesting film, right? So, and Alfonso Cuarón has two other films that could make this list, and they are And Your Mother Too from 2001 and Roma from 2018. But I think Children of Men is his best film. All right. So next up after, so that's number 45, Children of Men in 2006, directed by Alfonso Cuarón. And I'm gonna brutalize his name every time I say it, right? Okay, next up after that is number 44, and this film is from 1999, directed by Sam Mendes, and it's American Beauty. And this film, Kevin Spacey, he's a great actor, whether he's an ass in real life and his behavior is unacceptable as an actor, he's extremely good. And in this film, it's probably his best film, this one and The Usual Suspects. In this film, he plays like a 40-something guy who just gives up on life. He just says, fuck it, I don't want to do it anymore, and starts smoking pot and working out because his life is miserable. He's married to a woman that just fucking castrates him all the time. And anyways, he just gives up and drives his wife crazy. And it's like this super dysfunctional family. And his daughter, her friend, has an attraction to him. And that's where the buck stops. But I don't want to kill the film for you, but you'll understand what I mean by that when you watch the film if you haven't seen it. All right. So, very good drama, very good film. Kevin Spacey does a really great job on it. If you've canceled Kevin Spacey, then you're probably not going to watch this film. But if you haven't, if you can separate the asshole guy from the art, then do so. And American Beauty is one of the all-time greatest films of all time, and I'm going to watch it. So, uh, so that's directed by Sam Mendes. Mendes has some other films that could make the list. Probably, well, he directed two of the James Bond films, Spectre from 2015 and Skyfall from 2012. That reinvigoration of Bond where it became serious, you know, serious action, serious person, serious shit happening. Less of that, James Bond was always just not a really comic character, but he seemed to do everything lightly, right? It's all about girls and guns or whatever, and he breezed through life. He was always in a good mood. He had a sense of humor about everything. But then Daniel Craig comes along and Sam Mendes comes along and they direct, James Bond as a really serious character and the shit that's happening in it really serious as well, right? So they added that like grit. There's no humor in any of Daniel Craig's portrayal of Bond, right? So and also he also directed 1917 from 2019, and just in the last 3 years or whatever, that film, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's a great film. It's become one of the great war films of all time, 1917, right? So that is number 44, American Beauty from 1999, directed by Sam Mendes. Number 43 is a John Huston film, The Maltese Falcon from 1941. You got to have a Humphrey Bogart film in this, right? So there's a few of them actually, but this is probably Huston's best film, at least in my opinion. Although I really enjoy The African Queen as well, but The Maltese Falcon. Do I really have to go into that film much? It's a great film. John Huston is a great director, one of the greatest of all time. In fact, here's the list of all the films that could have made this list if it wasn't for The Maltese Falcon. All right, and that's here it is: The Treasure of the Sierra Madre from 1948, Key Largo from 1948, The Asphalt Jungle from 1950, The African Queen, which I just mentioned, from 1951. The Night of the Iguana from 1964. Fat City from 1972. And The Man Who Would Be King from 1975. That's how good John Huston is as a director, right? But I chose The Maltese Falcon from 1941 as his best film, and it's number 43 on my list. All right, so what's up after that? Number 42 is a John Woo film from 1992 starring Chow Yun-fat, and that is Hard Boiled. And this is an extremely good film. Now, John Woo's action films in Hong Kong before he came over to the States to direct them in the States, where a lot of them kind of flopped. But he had like three films in Hong Kong that just blew everybody away. The slickness of it, the characters, uniforms or whatever, like uh, the actual visualness of all these action scenes, right? The people are wearing white suits and black, and there's that black and white stuff, and then there's the color, and then there's it's almost like an action art form, right? John Woo was really good at that, and Chow Yun Fat in Hard Boiled is probably the best out of all those films, and it's from 1992. If you really enjoy like action, police, yakuza type of stuff, you're gonna like John Woo's Hong Kong stuff, if you don't mind the subtitles, anyways. And he did two other films as well. So there's this group of films in the late 80s to the early 90s that bang, 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 just one after another that was just like wow and wow and wow, right? And those were The Killer from 1989, which was the first one, and then Bullet in the Head from 1990, which was the second one, and then Hard Boiled from 1992, which is probably the best of all three of them. So investigate some John Woo's Hong Kong output if you really like action films. All right, so that's number 42, Hard Boiled from 1992, directed by John Woo. All right, next up after that is number 41. All right, and it's directed by Harold Ramis. And it is Groundhog Day from 1993. And this is such a good film. How would I best put how what the greatness of this film is? Okay, if you take the premise of a person being stuck in a time loop, all right, where it's 24 hours in this film, where so you go out, you enjoy your day, you fall asleep when you wake up in the morning, it's the exact same day that you just had, and then you go about doing that again and again and again and again and again. How do you make that interesting? How do you not boil the living crap out of your audience? Well, Harold Ramis did it because this is one of the most enjoyable films I've ever seen, and I don't know, Bill Murray he always plays the same character that lovable, sarcastic type of guy, right? Uh, and he plays that here. But so he's gone to a small town. He's like a weather reporter, and he's gone to wherever it is it in Maine to go see the groundhog to see whether he sees a shadow. It's a stupid thing, but it's a tradition, right? Like go see the shadow and whether you're going to have an early spring or not, right? So he's in this podunk type of town, and he ends up getting caught in this time loop. And the premise is very interesting, but can Ramis pull it off and make it so that it's not boring? Well, he does because like Bill Murray goes about doing a whole bunch of different things in this 24-hour span that are quite humorous, right? So it's quite a fun film, and it's kind of like a romantic. There's a romantic to it as well. There's a romance in it as well. That's very enjoyable to watch and joyful. So yeah, it's quite a funny film, and I think it's my choice of the best Ramis film. But a lot of people will choose others of his first over Groundhog Day. Anyway, so that's number 41 on the list. Now Harold Ramis did have a few other films that could make this top 130 list if you like comedies, obviously. Right? If you don't like comedies, these aren't going to make the top. Well, maybe they would anyways. I don't know. He had so many really good films. He was like in the 1980s, he's probably the king of the great comedies, right? So he had Caddyshack in 1980, uh, Stripes in 1981, Vacation in 1983. and Ghostbusters in 1984. Any of those four films you could put in with Groundhog Day, right? So, and I don't think it would look out of place, right? All right, so that's number 41, Groundhog Day from 1993, directed by Harold Ramis. He actually just passed away recently. So, next up after this is number 40, which is a Roman Polanski film. And out of all the Roman Polanski films, which film do you think I picked? Well, I picked The Pianist, starring Adrian Brody from 2002. I really, really enjoyed that film, and maybe it was because it was more accessible. Some of Polanski's films are, they're European, and when you're used to North American films and you watch some of Polanski's films are kind of like they seem out of they're good, and they're good when you're watching them, but you have to. I always explained it to myself. It's like Shakespeare. When you read Shakespeare, Shakespeare is really good, but you're just trying to get through the language, and it's like a hump that you can't get over. Well, but once you do get over that hump, which I did, you start reading Shakespeare, and once you understand the language that Shakespeare is using, man, he is friggin' hilarious. All right, I really enjoyed his comedies over his histories or his tragedies or whatever. His comedies, Shakespeare's comedies, are some of the funniest things I've ever read, and Polanski's kind of like that with his films. Some of his films, they're directed in a style that you're not used to when you're watching American films, or most of the films that you're watching are American films, right? There's kind of like a difference to it, right? That you got to get used to. But once you do get used to a Polanski film, then you get blown away by Polanski's film. But with The Pianist, you didn't have to do that. With The Pianist, it was you can't really call it. Well, can you call it an American film? But anyways, it had the accessibility that American films for North Americans do, right? So that's why I enjoyed it so much, and the story is really, really, really good as well, right? But if you're more of a traditional type of Polanski, you would probably put one of these films in your list rather than The Pianist, all right? And that would be Knife in the Water from 1962, Repulsion from 1965, obviously Rosemary's Baby. A lot of people would probably pick that, or from 1968, or Chinatown from 1974 as his best film. And then, but you also have The Tenant from 1976. So any of those six films, including The Pianist, on the list. All right. All right. So that's number 40, The Pianist from 2002, directed by Roman Polanski. Next up after that is number 39, and this is directed by the Wachowskis. And this is called The Matrix, the first of the three films. Is the best out of all of it from 1999. That film was probably my all-time favorite action film from the 90s, probably. I mean, everybody went to see that one in the theater, and then when they saw it in the theater, they went again to the theater and watched it again. It was such a mind-blowing film, and it's basically what? It's basically who was it? Who was the French philosopher? Blaise Pascal. Was it Pascal? Anyways, I'll put the name down here. Basically, he did that argument, um, that the only thing that really exists is you, because you think so. You think, therefore you are. I think, therefore I am. This is basically that. It's basically saying, yeah, Mr. Philosopher, bullshit. Everything is real through your senses. Yeah, but your senses can be tricked. You know that, right? I mean, when you're dreaming, do you think that you're dreaming? No, you think you're actually in reality until you wake up. So how do you know when you wake up the dream isn't the reality? The reality is the dream, right? The only thing 100% sure exists, and everything else you don't, is you, because you think, right? You think you're in there thinking, and that has nothing to do with any of your senses, right? So the Wachowskis took that idea, at least they had to have been influenced by that idea, and created a whole world that is an imaginary world where human beings live in a world that machines have taken over, and now all they are batteries. They're basically put in this gloop, hooked up to wiring, and their body electricity is what millions and millions of them give to the machines to keep the machines alive, right? So, and then every once in a while somebody actually wakes up out of the dream and realizes what's really going on, and so that is an extremely brilliant idea for a film, and they pull it off really well. Now, people have, panned the second film and the third film. I haven't seen the fourth one, but I really enjoyed both of those films, the second and the third one. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first one, but I did enjoy it. I did enjoy all three of them, right? So, but it's the first one that is the best. Now, other than those films, obviously, the Wachowskis had one other film that could make this list, and that's Cloud Atlas from 2012. If you haven't seen that film I really enjoyed as well. All right, so that's number 39, The Matrix from 1999, directed by the Wachowskis. All right, so next up is number 38. And number 38 is my all-time favorite, or what I consider the greatest horror film of all time, and it's directed by William Friedkin, and it's from 1973, and it's The Exorcist. And basically, this film scared the living crap out of me. All right. There's nothing scarier if the director can pull you in and take away your disbelief and suck you into a film and make you think that that film could be real. It's one thing of a slasher or a killer that will scare the living crap out of you. It's another thing when it's the supernatural, right? With the supernatural, it just adds that extra element because there's no control over it. You could fight a serial killer if you use your brain, if take like a martial arts or something along those lines. That type of stalker killer type of guy you can always defend yourself against, right? But there is no defense against the supernatural. The supernatural just comes and gets you, and there's nothing you can effing do, right? So this whole thing about possession from an evil spirit is like really, really creepy, all right? And then the way that Friedkin did it just blows you away, and that Linda Blair scene where she's in the bed and she talks in that wah voice and says those really rude things, and then her head twists around. That when that movie came out and you saw that, it was like whoa, and yeah, it's the greatest horror film of all time in my opinion. All right, and it's from 1973, The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin. Now, William Friedkin is a very good director. He has a number of films that could make a top 100 list, other than The Exorcist, and they would be The Boys in the Band from 1970, The French Connection from 1971, Sorcerer from 1977, and To Live and Die in L.A. from 1985. All right, so that's Friedkin. The Exorcist, number 38 on my list. Number 37 is my all-time favorite action film. All right, I think this is the best action film of all time, directed by John McTiernan, and it's from 1988, and it's called The Die Hard, starring Bruce Willis. That whole idea, that film was just such. I've watched it hundreds of times, and I just don't stop enjoying it. It blows you away. Everybody considers it's a Christmas movie, so at least once a year I watch it on Christmas or near Christmas, and yeah, it's just yeah, it all happens at Nakatomi Plaza, right? Nakatomi Plaza, right? And yeah, it's such a great film. It's just a adrenaline rush throughout the whole film, right? It's funny because I think Bruce Willis became an action star with this film because before this he was on TV. He was doing moonlighting. He did moonlighting in that, and then they grabbed him, and he wasn't a known name at the time. And they did this, and he had an action career. And how many Die Hard films afterwards? Like five or six of them afterwards because of this film. Yeah, it's such a great film. If you haven't seen it, you have to watch it. You have to watch it. All right, now McTiernan does have other films that could make the list: Predator from 1987 or The Hunt for Red October from 1990. Either one of those two were really good as well. Right. All right, so that's number 37, Die Hard from 1988, directed by John McTiernan. All right, number 36 on my list is a Spike Jones film from 1999, and that is Being John Malkovich. And this is a really hilarious film. Um, Basically, it's about this building that I think it's a 13th floor, but the 13th floor is like half the size, and it has this door in it. And if you open that door and jump through that door, you end up in John Malkovich's head, and you can control John Malkovich. And that premise is just hilarious, and how Spike Jones pulls that off. Yeah, he did a really good job with that, and you're laughing throughout this whole film, right? And John Malkovich is such a serious actor, you know what I mean? He's got that dry sense of humor, but he's perfect for Shakespeare. He's perfect for like doing like Shakespearean tragedies, and now he's in this film, being taken over by different people. Anyways, and it's not just that. There's the storyline of it is quite well done as well, right? So if you haven't seen Me and John Malkovich, take a look at it. I think you'll enjoy it. Now, Spike Jones has other films that could make a list as well. Adaptation from 2002 and Her from 2013. That Her film, I really enjoyed that film as well. Right, so that's Me and John Malkovich from 1999, directed by Spike Jones. Number 36 on the list. Number 35 is a Fritz Lang film. Now, Fritz Lang, one of the all-time greatest directors of all time. I can't say that anymore. How many all times can I say, right? But my favorite film of his is The Big Heat from 1953. All right. Uh, but he has so many films that could make it. But a lot of them are dry, a lot of them are old, and they're hard to understand. And he goes back to almost the beginnings of cinema, right? But he has that. I don't know why, but so many German artists, whether they're writers, filmmakers, musicians, a lot of them are so inaccessible, so difficult to understand. And Fritz Lang occasionally has that to his in his repertoire as well. But The Big Heat was one of the great film noirs, and Fritz Lang did a few film noirs that are just really good, right? Uh, but he did other films as well. And here's the huge list of Fritz Lang films that you could put in a top 100 and they would not be out of place. You have Mabuse the Gambler Part 1 from 1922, Mabuse the Gambler Part 2 from 1922, so those two films. Siegfried's Death from 1924. See how old Fritz Lang is? He's back in the 1920s and the start of film, right? But the starting of film, these films are good, but they're good as compared to other films of that time. You're not used to watching this type of film. This type of film is 100 years old, and unless you get the context and the limitations of what film could do at the time, a lot of the times when you watch it, it's just and the quality of the film, it's so old, right? It's in black and white. You got the chops and everything else on it a lot of times. So it is sometimes difficult to watch these films, but they're good films for what they were at the time, right? Another one is I'm just getting over a cold, so I have throat surgery, and then I end up, getting a cold. So I drink some water, see how my throat is. Now he did a good amount of American films, but he also did German films. So some of these may be difficult for me to, like this one is difficult for me to pronounce. Crime Hid's Revenge from 1924. Metropolis, which is one of his big films from 1927. Spies from 1928. M, another one of his great known films from 1931. The Testament of Dr. Mabuse from 1933. Fury from 1936. You Only Live Once from 1937. The Woman in the Window from 1944. Scarlet Street from 1945. And Contempt from 1963. These are the films probably that everybody thinks are his greatest films, and they could make this list, right? All right, but I chose The Big Heat, the film noir. I really like film noir, so I chose one of his film noirs from 1953, and that's number 35 on the list, directed by Fritz Lang. Number 34 on the list is a Robert Zemeckis film from 1985, and it's Back to the Future, one of the funnest films I've ever watched. That's such a great ride. It's basically Michael J. Fox, who plays a student, and he is a professor, and they end up going back in time in a DeLorean and to fix Marty McFly, who is basically Michael J. Fox's life because he's disappearing from existence because his mother and his father don't meet and fall in love. Right? Anyways, it's quite a fun film, and it's funny. It's joyful. It's charming. It's intriguing. Everything and the you know the costumes in it are really really good as well. So whoever did the costumes in this film, anyways, it's a very good film. Zemeckis also had some other films that could make this list. In fact, some might even pick one of these other films instead of Back to the Future, but I think Back to the Future is probably his best film. Who Framed Roger Rabbit from 1988, Forrest Gump, which would be the one that a lot of people may choose over Back to the Future, from 1994, and Castaway from 2000. Any of those three films as well are worthy of a top 100 pick. All right, so that's number 34 from 1985, Back to the Future, Robert Zemeckis. Number 33, we will wait. So number 34, we'll end it there, and we'll do the top 33 in the next break of film. All right, so thank you for listening, and I will see you in a second in film time, anyways, to do 33 to number one. What do you think is my number one pick? We shall see. All right, and you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you in a couple of seconds. All right, bye for now.